Kia ora everyone. Welcome to the first webinar hosted by the Auckland Young Engineers Committee. My name is Christine Lim and I work as a water engineer at WSP in the Auckland office. I'm also currently the Vice Chair of the Auckland Young Engineers Committee for 2021. So thanks for joining us today. We've got a really interesting topic for discussion and a great lineup of panelists. So I'll quickly just run through the format of this webinar. We've got 3 speakers, which I'll introduce shortly. Each of those speakers will have a presentation of 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll have about 15 minutes at the end of the presentation for a Q&A. So you can post your questions in the chat anytime throughout the presentations, and these will be read out at the end of the webinar. If you'd like to direct any of your questions to a specific speaker, just make sure that you put their name before your question. So I'll just get straight into it and introduce our speakers. So first up, we've got Troy Brockbank. He's a senior environmental consultant with WSP. He's a board member of Water New Zealand and 2018's Young Water Professional of the Year. He's got over 14 years of professional experience in the water industry and has an advantage of seeing aspects from both an engineering and Te Ao Māori worldview. In his current position at WSP, Troy has a leadership role to bridge the gap between these two worlds and lead Mātauranga Māori input within the company. Next up, we've got Rosalind Archer. She's Acting Deputy Dean of Engineering at the University of Auckland. She's Deputy President at Engineering New Zealand and holds a PhD in Petroleum Engineering from Stanford University. She also chairs the Faculty of Engineering's Equity Committee and is proud to champion the diversity agenda, the faculty's Rainbow Engineering Group, and is on her journey to grow her knowledge of Te Ao Māori. Lastly, we've got Danny Paxson. She's a California licensed structural engineer and project director with Holmes Consulting in Auckland. She's a member of the Holmes Global Diversity and Inclusion Committee and is involved with the diversity agenda. Prior to relocating from the US to New Zealand, Danny played a role in several US-based diversity and inclusion initiatives, including serving on the executive board of directors for the Women in Construction Operations, participating in the planning of the American Institute of Architects Powerful Conference, and playing a really key role in the Structural Engineering Engagement and Equity Committee. So as you can see, we've got a really great lineup of panelists for today's webinar. Don't forget to post your questions in the chat. And now I'll just pass on to Troy to kick us off.
Kia ora everyone. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa, ngā mihi o te pō ki a koutou katoa, ngā tangata e whakarongo mai ana. Welcome, nau mai, hara mai. Ko taumata māhoi te maunga, ko tangonge te wai, te reke te ripo, ko tinana te waka, ko te raroa te iwi, ko Ngāti te ao te hapu, ko te raroa te marae, ko puhipoto te kāinga. Ko Troy Brockbank ahau. This is me here, by the way. If you still know what I look like, obviously you can see me on the screen. Right. On the first photo there, you can see that I was pretty fresh in my thinking, my diversity of thought, and being a future digger driver. Into the middle screen is when I graduated from the University of Auckland with a degree in civil engineering. That's at the Maori grad at the Marae, the Waipapa Marae down in the university in Auckland. And then the last photo there is when I just became deputy chair of my first industry body, being the Water New Zealand Stormwater Group. I quite like these photos because they're 3 pivotal moments, I think, in my career where I've done something different or I've achieved something. So this kind of makes up who I am, ko Troy ahau. He tereke te whae o te tangata e ngā mahi kino, i te whae e ngā mahi pai. Humans tend to pursue evil more readily than good. This whakatauki resonates with me quite a bit, and it's what I've seen in the industry of the engineering profession as I've grown up through it. I've seen a lot of interesting things through my short career, and I'm only I think a Gen Y. I'm only quite young in my profession, but um, a lot of things have changed, um, especially to what I see as with regards to Maori and engineering. When I first started as a graduate, you couldn't even say kia ora to somebody. Whereas now, fast forward for 15 years, um, people are regularly saying kia ora to me around the office. People say morena, which means good morning. And people are using te reo regularly, and also in the email. So, we've moved on quite a bit, and it's really awesome to see that. So my presentation today, even though it is on diversity in the workplace, I'm just going to tailor it to what I have observed um, as a civil engineer, as a Maori civil engineer, um, working across consultancies, contractors, councils, and iwi groups and suppliers. So this is what I've tailored my specific presentation on. So feel free to ask any questions along the way. I know there's a Q&A somewhere, but feel free to ask questions as we go, and yeah, we'll have time at the end to answer them. On the screen now, I just put a definition of engineering. I've just taken it from 3 different sources that I could find. One being, I think it's the Merriam-Webber dictionary, where it talks about an engineering is the activities or function of an engineer. It's also the application of science and mathematics by which the properties of matter and the sources of energy in nature are made useful to people. Also from a similar definition from the Collins Dictionary. But I think my favorite definition of engineering has to be the last one, which is from the Britannica Encyclopedia. Talking about engineering is the application of science to optimum conversion of the resources of nature to the uses of humankind. What I find quite interesting about these definitions of engineering is there's no mention of diversity, there's no mention of inclusion, so there's no notion of segregation or separation. So to me, by reading this, it means that engineering is quite a diverse and inclusive profession and industry. However, we all know that's maybe not so true, especially when we look around our workplaces and our offices, and it's significantly outweighed. Swinging to one particular demographic of people and diversity in engineering. I also when I was looking for these definitions of engineering, I also found this interesting definition of an engineer. Someone who does precision guesswork based on unreliable data provided by those of questionable knowledge. See also wizard and magician. Again, no diversity and inclusion there, but one does have to make you think when they also put wizard and magician down the end. And if they're singling out the truth of the engineering industry, and if it is tailored towards that one particular demographic. So I just got a first poll for everyone here. Tasha, do I have to drag it across? Or, no, you're going to do it? Awesome. So I've just got our first poll here, so feel free to fill it in as we go along. But yeah, just quite interested to see how many Maori engineers out there. Yeah, just quite interested. If you work with any, or you know of any, or perhaps you know none. So we'll just give this a little bit longer. And it looks like, okay, I think that's about enough time. Yeah, and you can kind of guess that. There's not many of us around. And the reason why, most people have only seen 0 to 5, 73% of everyone is, according to these fun facts, question mark included. These are facts that are found on Maori engineers. 6% of engineers were Maori, according to a Ministry for Pacific Peoples report in 2016. In 2018, a report was done for Engineers Without Borders, and they had written that Māori made up 16% of the population, but only 1.9 of Engineering New Zealand membership were of Māori descent or identified as Māori. I think that 1.9% is the chartered engineers, but please do not quote me on that. Yeah, through engineering, we had 5.1% undergraduates in 2018, yet 6% of all engineers in 2016 were Māori. So even though that's just one university, I'd like to think that would probably be the university that may have the highest Māori population, Māori and Pacifica population out of all our engineering tertiary institutes in New Zealand. So, you know, if we were at 6% in the industry and we go to 5.1% as graduates or undergrads, you know, are we going backwards? You know, is that representative of all of New Zealand? It's quite an interesting fact, or interesting statistic. Again, 3.2 engineers postgraduates in 2018 identified as Māori. And as per the Diversity Agenda report, now I'm not too sure if that came out this year or earlier. I've just taken this from the website. But 4.5% of engineers and architects are Māori. And I suspect that, you know, maybe less than half of that percent of that 4.5, so maybe around, you know, the 1.5 to 2 would probably be more on the engineering side than the architect side. I don't have that data in front of me, but I just suspect. So these numbers here aren't supposed to show you, you know, hey, we need to get to this number. We need to get to 16%. We need to get to 10% Māori in our companies, in our industry. No. That's not the purpose of these numbers. The purpose of these numbers is just to highlight how little engineers that identify with Māori there are out there. Another interesting fact is that, you know, not all Māori are the same. We come from different places in Aotearoa, and you can see that from the map on the screen there. You may not be able to read the words, but they all represent different iwi groups and confederation groups as well, or, you know, wider iwi groups, or related groups. We also have different mita and dialects, and most people think that Te Ao Māori there's just one dialect, but, you know, all throughout New Zealand we speak different dialects. We can all understand each other, but there's some noticeable differences. We have different kawa or protocols or tikanga, the way we do things. Being a Māori, you know, you're not just Māori. Well, we're whānau, we're hapu, we are a iwi, we are the whenua, we are the wai, we are the taiao. So these are all what kind of makes up this term Māori, and it does differ from iwi to iwi and place to place, waterway to waterway. One of the reasons why I suspect that engineers may not, or a lot of young Māori engineers may not have gone into engineering, could have been because as a result of the Haka Party. And if you don't know about the Haka Party, it was this disgraceful event that during the capping stunts of you know, the university, Auckland University in the days of old, where they would dress up and, you know, get up to represent what they thought was Māori culture and go down Queen Street and get drunk and, you know, do silly things and do this observe haka at the end. Until 1979, when Hilda Harawira, and you can see that in the left-hand picture there, confronted, I think actually that may have been her in 1978 actually. She confronted them and told them to stop doing this. And Auntie Hilda was from the north. All my family knew about the Haka Party, and I was always discouraged from becoming an engineer because of this event, and a lot of others. And when we still go up north, people still talk about the Haka Party and, you know, how it's not cool to be an engineer. So these are kind of the repairs that we need to do. Cool thing about Maori engineering is, Maori have been doing it for years. We sailed here on these waka haurua, or these ocean voyaging waka. We didn't have GPS. Um, we're still doing it to now. We've got people up north, like uh, people that Uncle Heck has taught, Heck the Busby, and taught them to do ocean voyaging, and they've been out to Hawaii, Easter Island, all just on a carved waka from, a couple of trees. And again, no GPS, just using the stars and the current and the birds and the waves. I guess those of you who've seen the movie Moana will know what I'm talking about. But they've just sailed out there and found these lands. Past sites as well. It's huge Maori engineering with these big past sites, and the one there that you can see in the left is from Ruapekapeka. So there's a big past site. I think it might be a World Heritage, Engineering Heritage site. It's up in just north of Whangarei, just south of Kaukau. And on the right side at the bottom there, you can see these large scaffolds that they used to do in the old days, where they used to build these scaffolds and put food on them to show how wealthy and plentiful, and then everyone would come together and, eat together and drink together and be merry together. So they built these massive structures, and you can see the size of the people compared to these structures that they used to build. So these are some of the olden day Maori engineering techniques that they used to do. But more recently, we're bringing back these old techniques and practices through Mātauranga Māori, where it be implementing into wastewater treatment designs, structural designs and remembrance of those who've passed, traditional playgrounds like marahuparas, and navigational compasses like kapu whetus. So these are all the types of Māori engineering that have come into our modern world. It's one of the reasons why we do need more Māori in this industry to play a part, in designing and building these structures, but also helping with Indigenous knowledge. Just recently, well, yesterday, we heard about stuff. Apology to Māori for everything they've done, or through the press and the media that they've presented. And it kind of had me thinking. I was wondering, like, well, as us as engineers, what have we done to the whenua, to iwi Māori over, the last 150 years, the last 200 years, past the Treaty of Waitangi. And I think about a lot of the anger and grief that iwi and hapu have with the likes of councils and the Crown with regards to engineering projects. And I can think of a couple of wastewater treatment plants which are discharging into Tonga lakes of theirs, and they're not happy about it. I can think about motorways being built across bays, creating causeways, places where there's no longer a mahina kai or food source for the Māori who were living in those areas, and it's forced them out. I just think about all these things that have happened, and it kind of got me thinking quite a lot. And we just got another poll here. And what I was wondering is, should engineering companies and organisations in Aotearoa, New Zealand, follow the lead of stuff by undertaking similar investigations? It kind of also made me thinking about, what are we doing? What are we doing now, and what could we be doing to include Mātauranga Māori in the stuff that we do, or the designs, or the things we engineer? It had me thinking on about, what projects could we be doing to, reverse the effects we've done? What research could we be doing instead of kind of pushing a problem further down to somewhere else, but actually trying to bring it back so it's more of a circular and eliminating the problem? So it made me thinking about all these different things. So we'll just go to the next slide there, Natasha. think that was broadcast, so thanks everyone. 89% said yes to that, so here we go. Here's the challenge for everybody based on that. Is when we are talking about diversity and inclusion in the workplace, what that really means is, we need to value and naturalize Te Ao Māori. Um, we need to go out and engage with iwi. We need to, tautoko and support the use of Te Reo Māori or Māori language and tikanga in our companies. It's not to say that we make it mandatory, and it's not to say we don't leave it to the only brown person in the room, the Māori person in the room to undertake these things. But it's a mean that we need to kind of be aware and understand and make sure we are being quite inclusive of these things. We also got to look at engineering, as I showed you at the start, with regards to those statistics. Most recruitment plans I've seen from companies is about bums on seats. But, we can't just do bums on seats because there's not many bums to fit on the seats. We need to go out there. We need to promote engineering as a career pathway for these rangatahi. We need to, as companies, as engineers, as individuals, we need to support processes and programs like the Wonder Project, and get out there and go into these schools and entice our rangatahi and Māori and Pacifica and all our rangatahi into a career pathway into engineering. When we are engaging with iwi Māori, it's got to be regular, it's got to be genuine. It can't be a consultation, it can't be a tick box. You can't just turn up and expect that, oh yeah, we've done it, we go away. We've got to form these long-lasting relationships, and they do take time. We have to encourage our clients to form these relationships. We need to make sure we understand who's the mana whenua in the place, and have they got any effects, understand their aspirations, and as much as possible include them into our designs. We need to recognise our past, our present, and our future. We can't just take the good things. We can't be selective. You heard the saying, go hard or go home. You can't just say, all right, I've done my pepeha, that's it. I don't want to do any more else. We need to be able to do everything. We'll need to have the understanding that once we've learned something, we need to continue to learn and improve. And that goes for pronunciation as well. We need to create these safe havens, and the work's a nice space to do a safe haven, and also with whānau around you and the staff around you. And don't rush it. Just take it. As long as it's steady and it's moving, that's kei te pai. It's all good. And the last thing is, when we do engage, we need to support Māori to exercise kaitiakitanga and advance Māori well-being. What we shouldn't do is decide the fate of Māori for Māori, without Māori, but we do need to include them. So for those out you who are interested in learning more, highly recommend this course at the Wā, Te Wānanga Aotearoa. It's probably about now I should get some commissions because I promote this course so much. We're doing this quite a lot in WSP, and Christine is going to be one of the first graduates that we're running in-house. But yeah, awesome course. You learn all about Te Ao Māori, presented in English. You learn all about the Māori way, and it's a very basic and beginner level, I guess, of Te Ao Māori in the Māori world, which will help you understand Māori concepts and how you can bring them into your work as an engineer. And I think this might be the last one, but just before we leave, I just wanted to remind those out there that are Māori, continue to be like Maui, continue to be like Mahuika. These are probably two of the most important engineering, I guess, deities we have from across the Pacific. Maui, who fished up Aotearoa, slowed down the sun, did these amazing engineering feats. One thing to point out though, Maui didn't do this alone. He had a lot of whānau, a lot of support. He also got his knowledge from his grandmother, so he got his wisdom from a wahine. How cool is that? He just didn't do it by himself, but he consulted with others, grabbed that knowledge, and then went out and did these amazing feats. And same with Mahuika. Although she had the fire, she had the knowledge of fire. How cool is that, being able to create fire with your fingertips. But unfortunately it was Maui who came along and, destroyed that knowledge. So no one else could do it, according to the pūrākau that were passed down to us. But it's really important for you out there to, be innovative, be creative, be like Maui, be like Mahuika. Kei tēnā no, tōna ake āhua, tōna ake mauri, tōna ake mana. Each and every one has their own uniqueness, life isn't, and presence. That concludes my presentation. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. Ngā mihi nunui kia koutou katoa.
Thanks, Troy. That was really interesting insight into how we can further extend ourselves and integrate Mātauranga Māori into our projects and workplaces. And yeah, I really recommend the He Papa Tikanga course for any of you guys that are interested. So after that, we're just going to pass on to Rosalind. Thanks, Rosalind.
Thank you very much. I would like to begin with a visual version of a pepeha. I grew up in New Plymouth. I moved to Tamaki Makaurau, to Auckland, last century, to study engineering. From there, I left Aotearoa to do a PhD at Stanford University, which is the beautiful shot in the bottom right. I found my way home eventually, and home for me now is at Te Henga at Bessels Beach on our wonderful west coast. And work-wise, home for me is the Faculty of Engineering, Te Herenga Mātai Pukaha, where I'm currently acting Deputy Dean of Engineering. So in the bottom left corner is a picture of our wonderful new engineering building that is home to our faculty. I am also proud to be Deputy President of Te Ao Rangahau Engineering New Zealand. So that is a very quick intro into me and where I fit in. We were asked to think about what is diversity, and in many ways I skipped straight over that as a question, because for me diversity should never be the goal. We have to aim for genuine inclusion. And you will see a little bit of a musical theme running through my slides. So when I think of inclusion and what that really means, to me it means respect and finding out what respect means to someone else. So I have some wording on the slide that I borrowed from the Diversity Council of Australia, which thinks about inclusion as a combination of respect, connection, contribution, and progression for everybody in your organisation. It cannot be a cookie cutter type of approach. We were also asked to reflect on diversity in our own careers. And when I thought of that, diversity now is integral to everything I do in our wonderful faculty. And I want to start picking up some ideas from Troy's messaging and to talk to you a little bit about our faculty haka. Me hoki whakamuri ki anga whakamua. Let's acknowledge the past to go boldly into the future. So this is the title of our faculty haka. It was specially composed for us by Tāpeta Wehi for the opening of our new building last year. And it's a real celebration of us, of our values, of our faculty culture, and it's a call to excellence. But that haka cannot erase our faculty's checkered past with the haka. The Haka Party incident that Troy mentioned is a real, genuine slur on our history. Young engineers may not have much awareness of the Haka Party, but I would encourage you to find out about it, to reflect on it, because it is baggage that anyone associated with the University of Auckland will carry, regardless of whether you were there in 1979 or not. So it was deeply disrespectful, led to violent clashes. It's something I'm not proud of any aspect of. But it lives, as I say, on with us today. If you go to the Wikipedia page and look up the word haka, you still see references to the Faculty of Engineering's Haka Party. So learning to do a genuine, meaningful haka was an incredible journey for our faculty. And that journey included hoarse throats, it included bruised thighs, bruised arms from the vigour and the slaps in some of the gestures. But people wore those bruises with pride as they went through the process. I believe on the day we performed that the sort of tidal wave of power and emotion that came out and just enveloped the room actually caused someone in the audience to faint. And I'm also really pleased that the performance group, which was 50 or 60 people, were diverse but were united. They were staff from all over the world, standing tall with some of our Maori students. And this was not an act of theatre. We really, truly hope it marks the start of a new chapter in our history at the faculty, a chapter that is genuine and is inclusive, but we cannot erase that past. So that is one angle of diversity in my current career. I also work with our Women in Engineering project. I co-founded our Women in Engineering Student Network when I myself was a student, and we are trying to reach a bold goal of getting to 33% female enrolment as soon as we can. And our female students are integral to that journey. They know how to access the hearts and young minds of young women far better than I do, because I'm no longer young. So we work really hard to empower those students to be our ambassadors for recruitment. But in return, I want the profession that they graduate into to be one that is supportive of them. So our faculty are founding partners of the diversity agenda. And I also openly champion our Rainbow Engineering group. My laptop has a Rainbow Engineering sticker on its case. It may seem a small gesture, but for me that has meaning, because that laptop goes with me everywhere, including places like Saudi Arabia, which has some obvious challenges. This year I sweated with pride in a public fundraiser for the AIDS Foundation, although not so public because it was in lockdown. And I work with our staff to make sure that they understand our policies on inclusive teaching as it relates to gender identity and sexual orientation. And I've had Rainbow students tell me that they really, truly actively assess those policies when they're making their enrolment decisions. So how important is diversity at work? Well, I believe in a world where we can all bring our whole self to work. When I looked up some statistics in this slide in a rainbow context, they are sobering. The importance of being able to be out, of being able to be who you genuinely are at work is huge in terms of your ability to innovate, to be effective, to be satisfied. So I want all of us to live in a world where we're not scared, where we make no apologies to be who we are. And I sort of reflect on this in this next slide, and it's a shot of me in the dance studio. So until not so very long ago, I used to spend up to 8 hours a week in a dance studio, mixing in open classes with professional dancers. It's a world that is so different than engineering. Diverse gender identities, diverse sexual orientations, a community that are really collectively emotive and empathetic. I would come back to the office on Monday and the office seemed buttoned up, conservative. Early in my career, I worked in Texas where conservative values rule, and I adopted the self-enforced dress code. I was editing myself to be invisible and to fit in, and I'm sure that happens to other groups. I wore men's business shirts to work, blue trousers or black trousers was my only wardrobe decision for the day. And in doing that, I began to lose myself. So today I make a deliberate choice to be visible. For example, the prematurely red hair. So the shot on screen there is me in the dance studio with that ripped up business shirt as a costume, torn down the back so people can see my spine, and using that sense of cultural clash between work and the dance studio as inspiration for choreography itself. So culture matters. Empathy matters. If you want other people to bring their whole selves to work, you have to too. So don't be afraid to be who you are. Call people out if they step outside of the behaviours that you define to be important in your organisation. But do so with a spirit of learning and positivity. And when I've done that, it's always worked. You know, when I queried on a travel booking, why did someone automatically write so-and-so plus husband on a form when they didn't realize the person was in a same-sex relationship? Oh, yeah, never thought of that. We'll do better. Have a think about travel and whether that raises any issues. I travel the globe, or I used to in the old normal, but there are still places in the globe that kind of travel is not easy for everybody, especially for people from LGBT communities. And if you're speaking to someone who is unlike yourself, listen to understand. And if you offer people that genuineness, they will give you some insight into what their lived experience is like. I'd encourage people to think about the words they use, about the words in their emails, their jokes, because language is power. So can you find ways to be demonstrably inclusive? It's just not enough to be kind of neutral about these things, but can you be truly expressive of your inclusivity? Now, engineers like action. So for those of you who are in a relationship, think about how you refer to your partner. I'm married to the wonderful man on the screen there, my long-suffering husband. However, I do make a conscious and personal choice to also refer to him as my partner. Doing so normalizes people in same-sex relationships also referring to their partners at work. Suddenly, gender is so much less of an issue. So you will see that I wove some musical references into the graphics on the slide. Aretha Franklin asks us about what respect means. The Greatest Showman tells us not to be scared to be ourselves. David Bowie asks us to turn and face the strange. No value judgment implied there on what strange means. And the Indigo Girls ask us to multiply life by the power of two. Recognize people's partners. Let them into your world. Where would music be without those voices? Have a think. Now, where would engineering be without the equivalent of Aretha Franklin's power, David Bowie's amazing creativity, or the poetry of the Indigo Girls? Have a think about your own journey with Te Ao Māori. Troy's offered you some resources. I've done that program myself, and it's an excellent choice. Think about where you can weave whakatauki into your public speaking, if that's appropriate for you. If you ever get a chance to learn kapa haka, take it with both hands. You won't regret it. So I challenge you all to find your own ways to be loud, to be proud, and to celebrate diversity and inclusion in engineering. I will wrap it up there, but I would definitely welcome questions. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Rosalind. That's some really great tips on how we can encourage people to bring their whole self to work and also how we can celebrate diversity. So I'll just pass on to Danny now. Thanks, Danny.
Cheers, everyone. Good evening. Thanks for sticking around with us. I'm conscious that we're going a little bit long, and some of you out there may be quite hungry. So I'm going to try to go a little bit more quickly through my topics and my thoughts. Just to start with, I was born and raised in Southern California. I went to university in California, graduated with a degree in structural engineering from the University of California at San Diego, and practiced there in the Los Angeles area for a good part of my career before I moved over to New Zealand at the beginning of 2019 when I joined Holmes as a project director. So I've had an interesting journey. I grew up in an area that was incredibly diverse in every sense of that word. And it was both accepted and not. So there was tension around it in Southern California. As many of you are aware, there's tension around this topic in the US right now. I've always been interested in diversity and inclusion, but as I'll point out in a little bit here, it didn't really land on my radar until about halfway through my career, I would say. So I'll share a little bit more about that with you. In terms of what diversity means to me, I think at the core it means being your own unique self and at Holmes, I'm part of our Global Diversity and Inclusion Committee. One of the things we did when we formed this group about 2 years ago was to seek to identify what we wanted to convey out as our vision for all of Holmes. And we put it in really plain English, and I just wanted to read a piece of that. We've got a few pieces of our vision statement, but the one that I think is really cool and just really down to earth is that Holmes people are encouraged to dream big and are empowered to achieve their goals in an environment where you can relax and be yourself. We think it's that important, and I think it's that important that you are able to be yourself in your life, professional and personal. But beyond that, to me, diversity is the concept of acceptance and respect. So very much as Rosalind defined it. To me, it means understanding that each of us is unique and different and recognizing those differences and believing that there is power in bringing those differences together. And on top of that, I think it's really important to have an intentionally open mind. The intentional part is a big piece of this. It's really easy to say that you're being open, to hear words that people are saying, but I think in order to crack open this topic of diversity and to really achieve inclusion, we've got to be super intentional about having an open mind and be ready to hear what other people are saying. Along my career path, again, similar to Rosalind, I spent a good chunk of my career just blending and fitting in, and I don't think I was aware that that was happening. I think what happened is that there was a point in my career where my eyes were opened to what diversity and inclusion should look like, where we were lacking, at least within the professional setting of a structural engineer in California, and how that was influencing the careers of people around me and how it probably had influenced me to that point in ways that I hadn't really recognized. So reflecting on that, I realized that what I had been doing was fitting in with largely the boys, because the company I worked for, as with many companies still these days, was male dominated. And I was quite good at fitting in with the boys, and it didn't seem a struggle to me, and I never felt different. But there was a point in time when I looked back and realized that that's exactly what I had been doing. I had been adapting to fit in with my environment, and so I wasn't bringing my true self to work. And that's something that I don't necessarily regret, but it's an awareness that I'm happy to have had at least partway into my career. So that set me off on a journey of opening my mind up intentionally to what was going on around me, what was going on for myself in my career, and also for the people that I was working with. And somewhere along the way, as I was becoming involved in committees and initiatives, a women's network that I formed with the company I used to work with, and other diversity and inclusion conversations that were happening, I was exposed to unconscious bias training and this idea of gender intelligence, which was just a completely mind-blowing learning for me, which it basically is founded in the idea that men and women are biologically wired differently, and understanding how that manifests itself in men and women, and how powerful that is that we have these differences brought together across genders. So I have done a lot of learning on my career path, and it's been triggered by this eye-opening kind of moment that I had earlier on in my career. It's been a really cool thing. I love to learn. Relative to why we're talking about this topic, again, a common theme that you've heard a couple of us weigh in on now, it's hard to imagine that we still have to make the case for diversity and inclusion, but in many ways we do. I think it's important not to take for granted that people want it. We hope they do, and hopefully our professional world and our society at large embraces the importance of it. But it's always good, I think, to remind ourselves and each other of why it matters. And there are lots of reasons why it matters. But some of my favorites come from a study that I read about in Entrepreneur Magazine, which found that diverse teams adapt more readily to change, demonstrate a greater propensity to challenge, and they learn faster. And all of those things are qualities that underpin successful teams and successful outcomes. So obviously things that we want to see. But even more important than that, And I think I should have probably queued this up a moment ago, but could we bring across the poll on generations, please? So I'd be keen to see where all of you feel like you fit in terms of these various generations, baby boomer, Gen X, Gen Y, and if we have any Gen Zs, which would be probably our under 23-year-olds, be awesome to hear from you too. There we go. We do have a few of you. That's awesome. Okay, cool. We've got a pretty young group on this webinar. Anyway, I think that the most critical reason that diversity is important, the most critical piece of this, is that it's important to you. So it turns out that 86% of female Gen Yers in the US, so these are the 24 to 39-year-olds roughly, say that an employer's record on gender diversity, specifically gender diversity, is a make or break factor to their decision to work for that company. And related to Gen Z, so again, this is our youngest generation, the up and coming one that's going to be the future of all of our organizations. Gen Zs are the most racially and ethnically diverse group in the United States. And Gen Zs tend to prioritize diversity across race, gender, and orientation more than any other generation to date. So I think if for no other reason than it's important to this really important generation of people coming through and coming into our workplace, we should be considering diversity as a key element of how we live and work and interact with each other. There's been a massive amount of change in this space since I started working 20-something years ago, and the biggest and most interesting one to me, being an engineer, is data. So we've seen a ton of data emerge on the scene around diversity and inclusion, and that's a really powerful tool, I think, to start a conversation, especially for the doubters or cynics or people who tend to lean on the easy excuses or crutches when they don't really understand what's going on. And many of us don't really understand a lot of aspects of this. So data is really powerful. And there's been a lot of that has emerged over the years, particularly through a group called SE3 that I've done a lot of work with. Some of the other things I've seen, some of the other trends around diversity and inclusion have been formation of networks. And not just any network, because it's easy enough to form a network and give yourself a name and tick a box, but really meaningful networks that have become organic manifestations of what a particular community needs or a company needs or a group of people. And I've seen a lot of those emerge, and I've been involved in some of those. And it's been really cool to see those crop up to meet the needs of people wanting to connect on similar topics around diversity. Again, the increasing body of data that's become available has been really powerful, and I think is shifting people's point of view and having some people really open their minds up to this who maybe weren't paying attention before. Coming to New Zealand, it's been interesting just to notice that there is a growing global awareness and curiosity around this topic. I wasn't sure what the Kiwi culture would have in store for me when it came to this topic. I felt like Southern California was a pretty progressive and open sort of society and a safe place to bring this up. But it turns out that Kiwis, by and large, I have found, are super open to talking about this, very genuinely curious and interested in learning and shifting. So I've noticed more and more of that over the course of my career, and was incredibly surprised, pleasantly surprised to come to New Zealand and find that it was an even easier topic to address here. Lots of people are undertaking unconscious bias training, and I think this is a really useful tool. A lot of good can come out of it. There are lots of different versions of unconscious bias training that you can expose yourself to. And we do have a poll on that too, if you could bring that across. Thank you. Curious to see how many people have participated in some formal version of it. That could be web-based, or it could have been somebody coming to your place of work. So just interested to see how many people we have that have had some version of unconscious bias training. I'm going to just scroll through this real quick and see what we've got. I see a lot of no's, which is all good because that means lots of opportunity, but a handful of yeses. Cool. Thanks for that input. So when a lot of people ask me where a good place to start is when they're trying to shift the culture in their organization around diversity and inclusion, and I always recommend unconscious bias training because it's a really easy and it can be a really fun way to peel the layers back and understand where some of your biases are that might be getting in your way. And then just the recognition that this is now a mainstream topic and isn't one that we can ignore, we as society can ignore anymore. It's no longer the awkward topic that we have to find a way gracefully to bring up. I do believe it's part of our mainstream conversation these days, and that makes it part of what we think about when we're thinking about work culture. So along my path, I've had a few different points in time along my career where I've had to consider what diversity meant to me, how it was affecting me, how it was affecting people who I looked after professionally, and how I was going to make some shifts for myself and for the people that I influenced. And so I did two things. I found a way to join the conversation. For me, that was this group called SE3, which stands for Structural Engineers Engagement and Equity. Structural Engineering, rather, Engagement and Equity. So this is a California founded group that's now nationwide across the U.S. that looks at data related to the engagement of structural engineers within the profession in the United States and identifies trends and then develops findings that we report on and present on across the country. They're a really cool group of people with lots of different points of view. And I've been exposed not only to the data and to the trends that come out of the data, but through presenting this to like-minded and non-like-minded people, I've come across a lot of different points of view that have emphasized to me how important it is really to listen to your critics, to hear the other points of view, the other side of the story, and consider what diversity means for everybody. Because if it's just your view of it, it's not really a diverse view of it. And that is a closed-off way to view this topic that is trying to be inclusive of everyone. So that was the first thing I did, is found a way to engage. There were a couple of other organizations and networks that I joined, but this one really resonated with me. And for those of you wondering how to take some action or explore this a little bit more, I would encourage you to find a group of people who are addressing this or talking about it and exploring it in a way that kind of suits you and inspires you, and just roll with it. You might even end up starting your own thing. That could be a group of 2 people, or it could be a group of 200. But finding something that you're passionate about is a cool way to get involved in this. And the other thing I did, which I mentioned already, is I did a lot of learning. I did a lot of reading and presenting and talking to people about gender intelligence specifically. Found an author that I really loved called Barbara Annis, who's written a few books around gender intelligence, and I found her work super interesting and have learned a lot about gender relationships and how the two genders complement one another, not only in a professional setting, but also in a personal setting. And that's been really powerful stuff for me to learn. When we want to build an inclusive culture, and Rosalind's right, this is key. It can't just be diversity. You've got to think about the inclusivity piece of it too. And I think she said it too, but the key to all of this is to listen, and not just listen, but listen intentionally, which is a word I've used a couple of times now. So we've got to get used to hearing other people's points of view and being prepared to truly consider what they're saying and that it might be different from what we believe. If we don't prepare ourselves for that, then I think you'll find that in many ways, all of us, actually, it's a very human thing to do. We dismiss the things that don't click with us, that don't align with what we think is true or what we perceive to be. So it's really important to try to be super intentional about listening to the people around you, whether you're a young person starting your career, listening to what the people there who are coaching and mentoring you, what their thoughts are, and vice versa for people who have been in the business for a little while. So I think that's the fundamental thing to consider when you're trying to build an inclusive work environment. And then a handful of other things, many of which came out of the SE3 work, actually, and were findings related to ways in which we can build inclusive work cultures, are, in addition to allowing all voices to be heard and listening to them, providing mentors is a really great way to foster inclusivity. A lot of these things, by the way, they might sound pretty obvious, and they may sound like they aren't necessarily related to diversity and inclusion, but in fact, it's really important for people to feel heard and understood and supported. And so these are some of the ways that we as employers and companies can do that. So providing mentors, ensuring that we're aligning people's tasks with their career goals. This is another way of listening to people and showing respect for them. Defining expectations for advancement, making sure that career paths are clear for people and that they've got alternative career paths if the ones that might seem obvious aren't well suited to them. And then looking at flexible work options is another one that I think underpins making people feel supported and making sure you've got inclusivity. And so just to wrap up, I've mentioned a little bit about what you can do. Always good to channel your inner Yoda, who said, the more we learn, the more we discover how much we do not know. There's a lot we don't know. I'm on a perpetual journey to figure out what I don't know, what I've missed, what I've misunderstood. And I think when you question like that, you find that people trust you, and you find that you learn an awful lot and you gain a lot of respect. So allow yourself to stay on a journey of asking what matters to people and considering what they have to say around that. Don't show up expecting that people have it all figured out. I think that it's pretty easy, especially for people starting their careers, to imagine that because this topic's been out there for a while, those of us who've been in the industry for a wee while must have sorted it out, must be well on our way. And actually, we're all struggling and we're all learning, and none of us quite have this right. So I would say show up expecting that we've already gotten a few things wrong, but that we're open to learning and we want to hear your input. Assume that people around you are going to be curious and humble, and that you have something important to add to the conversation. Bring your whole self to work. That's something I can't stress enough. Again, looking back at the beginning of my career, I can see how I was morphing myself to fit in, and I don't recall having felt like I missed out on anything. But in a way, looking back, I regret a little bit that I wasn't aware of it sooner and that I couldn't really bring my full self to work, or didn't see that I wasn't bringing my full self to work. I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here, because I'm well aware that our younger generations do that more implicitly. So maybe you're already doing that in life and in work, and that's awesome. But just be sure you're doing that. Everybody wants the whole you there. Trust me, we want the whole you there. And also consider what kind of work environment will bring out the best in you. So people talk a lot about flexible work arrangements, and this is becoming quite the buzz term, and especially with COVID and working remotely, and people practicing that more and companies getting more and more used to it. It might seem, again, as though everybody's got that figured out and that there's one version of it, but there really isn't. So I have noticed that there's a certain kind of work environment and a certain flex to my schedule that brings out the best in me. And I didn't really get to experiment with that until this year, when we were forced to work from home for a period of time. So again, companies are struggling to figure this out. They're, I think, a little bit nervous about what it might mean, but wanting to do the right thing. And your voices matter. So speak up and let us know what you want. Let us know what makes you better, because that will make us better in the end. Thanks so much. More of what I said before. Thanks, everyone.
Great, thanks, Danny. That was really great. So I'll just ask Rosalind and Troy to join us for the Q&A, and we'll just get straight into it. So we've got a question for you, Rosalind. How have you connected WEN and Rainbow with Engineering New Zealand?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely look for opportunities to connect all our students with Engineering New Zealand. In fact, we do an exercise on ethics now that requires all the first years to do the Engineering New Zealand ethics module. So they have to engage long enough to do that, and hopefully they stay. But specifically for WEN and the Rainbow groups, I do look for targeted opportunities for points of connection, whether that's diversity agenda events, whether that's connections with the Wonder Project or other things. So, yep, always trying to make that happen.
Awesome, thanks for that. One for you, Troy. How do you see Mātauranga Māori being used in practice in the engineering field, and how can non-Māoris get educated on its significance?
Sorry, my kids are just running around outside, just trying to see what they're doing. Get up! Sorry, they're not listening. Anywho, I see Mātauranga Māori being used quite a lot in my field, and I try and bring as much of that as I can myself into different projects. Things that I've seen have been from crash studies, traffic crash studies, looking and using the maramataka or the Maori lunar calendar and the correspondence between low energy days according to the maramataka lunar calendar compared to where people are crashing their cars in different sites around in Auckland. So it's been used that way from the materials we use. At University of Auckland when I was there, Kipper Morgan was one of my supervisors, and we were looking at using clay reinforced with harakeke or flax fiber panels, and going on to build a PhD student going on to build multiple houses. So using those traditional knowledge around soil types and materials in New Zealand and bringing them into, I guess close to the building code. But also, with regards to in the water industry, and we're looking at different types of water, whether it's waikino or bad water or waimaori fresh water, and how to treat it and where it goes and giving it back to Papatūānuku or the Earth Mother and using the water cycle holistically. So these are all kind of ideas and practices that I've seen being used in myself. And how can Māoris get educated on its significance? I guess the first instance is, reach out to your local iwi, your hapa groups, go have a kōrero with them, go have a cup of tea with them, and just kind of find out what mātauranga is available in your area and what it means for the engineering world and talking through them with that. But also, there's those courses that I recommended as well. We'll get a really brief introduction into Te Ao Māori and Mātauranga. So those are some examples.
Great, thanks, Troy. Danny, we've got a question for you from Asian Events Trust. How can we find the balance of encouraging people to board the waka towards diversity and inclusion themselves instead of pushing them onto it, which is sometimes necessary?
Can you repeat the first part of that, Christine?
How can we find the balance of encouraging people to board the waka towards diversity and inclusion themselves instead of pushing them on it, which is sometimes necessary?
I generally like to draw people into this by example and telling stories. So I like to share why it's mattered to me or how I've seen it make a difference to somebody else. I do find that you have to be careful about how people receive this topic, and nobody wants to be lectured to or be pulled into something that they don't understand or felt that they're being put on the spot. And particularly, human beings generally don't like to be felt like they've done something wrong. So I think if you can tell a story that has a happy ending or that shows that some progress is being made because somebody took some action, engaged in some way with somebody that showed empathy or that demonstrated inclusive behavior, then you can hook them in with the result. So I start with stories. I think no matter who you are and how long you've been on the planet and how long you've worked, you've got stories. If you just reflect on your life and your interactions with your family, your friends, people at work, at university, people that you run into at the grocery store, you can probably come up with a story that relates to how that made a difference to somebody and how acting inclusively or considering how you were different from somebody else mattered. And maybe something that's worth doing is, we each talked about what diversity meant to us. So I think if each of us can consider what diversity means to us in our own words, then it's a little bit easier to talk about that and tell those stories. If you just throw the word diversity or inclusion out there, they're buzzwords and people may not, again, relate to them. So I think if you speak in plain English, say why that matters to you, what it means to you, and how you've seen it manifest yourself in a, garden variety situation in your life, that's a way to hook people in.
Great, thanks for that. And we've got another one for you, Jenny, from Emma. If you find yourself in a situation where you're confronted by unconscious bias, how do you go about processing that, and do you have any key tips to deal with that?
Oh, yeah. So similar, I would say, actually, storytelling. And also, I don't actually say these words, but in my mind, I figure out how to ask the question, well, what if this other thing? So a really common example is that when women go on maternity leave, I find that men and women make assumptions on their behalf. We decide that they're going to need lighter assignments, that they're going to want to taper off their project, that they're going to want to be left alone while they're on maternity leave. Well, that's not necessarily true. We fill in a lot of gaps. It's human nature, but I see this repeat itself with women headed out on maternity leave, that we're deciding for them, that we're going to wean them off of a project. We're not going to give them that next difficult project. We're going to allow them to be, completely offline while they're away, but maybe they want to stay connected. Maybe there's a client that's important to them. Mm-hmm. And once I tuned into that, it was probably about 10 years ago when we started to talk about this topic at the company I used to work for, and we were looking at what we called off-ramps and on-ramps, away from and back onto a career related specifically to maternity leave. Once that was on my radar, I started noticing these conversations all around me. Mm-hmm. And so now I'll just gently interject, because this is a form of unconscious bias. You're really, all that unconscious bias is having blind spots, which again is human nature. And it's actually really important that we have some biases, because we can't premeditate every action in life, or we'd never survive. We would have been eaten by tigers a million years ago. So these are not all bad. But this kind of behavior is a form of unconscious bias. When I pick up on it and I notice my colleagues talking about it, it might be during a resourcing catch-up, it might just be around the table or in the kitchen having coffees. I'll do that what if thing, and I'll say, oh, well, have we considered that I heard she's really connected to this client and she's put a lot of effort into building that relationship. Do you think she might be interested in staying in touch with them? So that kind of thing. Also, I have noticed a distinct difference between how men and women approach certain challenges, which relates to this general tendency. Of course, not everybody, not every man, not every woman, but this general tendency that women tend to not go for something unless we think that we're 150% qualified for it, whereas men are much better, bless them, at just rolling with it. And I'm going to say faking it till you make it, Troy, no offense, but it is a thing that men do, and I love them for it, and I wish I had more of that in me, but I don't. So I've had a number of occasions where a male colleague has approached me and said, well, why aren't you just doing this thing, which to me just sounded like jumping off a cliff. And so I think if you build some humor into it, it's also easier to approach people about this stuff. So I came up with this box of ducks analogy where I explained to my colleagues that you're willing to sell a box of ducks without even knowing there's ducks inside. I need my ducks in a row, and I need to know which one's the fluffiest and which one's the smallest. I need them all lined up, and then I can put them in a box and sell them. But until I'm 100% sure of what's in that box, I can't sell it. But you can, and that's your way, and that's my way. And so I think stories and analogies and that whole what if, like, how about think of it this way? What if you were me and you weren't comfortable selling this box of ducks? And so I think that's a way to confront unconscious bias without it being confrontational. Be a little bit self-deprecating. That's an easy way to bring people in. Tell stories. Do the what if thing. Because if you're just saying, oh, hey, you did something bad, well, nobody wants to hear that, right? But if you say, oh, hey, what about this other way? Then I think people would be open to listening.
Great. Thanks for that. So we've got a question from James for all three of you. So, is diversity at all levels of your workplaces? Do you think we should be giving minorities better opportunities in the hiring process to achieve a more diverse workplace? Do you want to kick us off, Rosalind?
Sure. Yeah. No. In my work workplace, there is a gradation in terms of what the staff looks like. I was the first woman, for example, to become a department head in the Faculty of Engineering. So we have some ways to go, but the earlier levels are more diverse than the senior levels, and it's something we're really aware of. In terms of opportunity, I think there's a lot of questions there about thinking about who is making the hiring decisions, what training do they have on things like unconscious bias, how and where are job opportunities being advertised, are people just shoulder tapping their friends to apply, or are we genuinely going to market in a way that builds a really diverse applicant pool? And that may take some very conscious shoulder tapping of people who don't think to put themselves forward. But I really think we have to tune the lens on the people doing the recruiting and the potential for unconscious bias and groupthink in those processes.
Yeah. Thanks, Rosalind. How about you, Troy?
Yeah, so took what Rosalind just said. Also, with regards to that recruitment phase, I know that when I've interviewed Maori and Pacific engineering students, they're quite comfortable talking to me, whereas when other people interview them, they're not so comfortable. And what I hear from the other interviews are they don't talk about themselves as much.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, and that's kind of shows that humility we have as a culture where we don't like to talk about ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
There's no one whakatauki that talks about how sweet a kumara is, but you don't hear a kumara talking about how sweet it is. And that's how I kind of look at a lot of things that I've done in my career, and I don't like to, I know others don't really like to boast about it. I was quite lucky when I went to the University of Auckland. They used to have a quota system, and I'm not too sure if they still have this quota system, Rosalind, but with regards to Māori students, because they wanted to get more Māori students into engineering. I was quite lucky, and I was determined to make sure that I didn't make it in as a quota student, so they made it in as a mainstream student, just to show that I could succeed, but also to open the door for others as well, who may not be, or who may not have got that chance otherwise. So I've never really been a big fan of the quota systems or hiring people because of that need to fill that quota. But I am quite a big fan of making sure there is a balance. And if something is way too far to one side, you don't have that diversity of thought, you don't have that inclusion. So maybe it is more of a lines of looking at those recruitment procedures to make sure you are targeting the right people that's needed to form that balance rather than always down the same track, so it's always one-sided.
Yeah. Thanks, Troy. How about you, Danny?
I'm feeling a little stumped on this. I might pass rather than ramble on.
Pass. No worries, we've got a few other questions to get to. Cool. Rosalind, we've got one for you from Philip. How can females be encouraged to consider engineering as a career without short-term incentives, which may not be sustainable?
Well, there's a lot of research on that, and I think a lot of it comes down to how engineering as a profession tells its story. How does engineering portray itself? And if it portrays itself as something that's, hardcore pursuit of maths, physics, large amounts of concrete and steel that, don't necessarily resonate with everybody, then that's not a good thing. So there has to be a balance in how engineering tells its story in terms of human impact in the world, as opposed to sort of very aggressive domination of the world.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Rosalind. Cool. We've got one last question here. We'll probably wrap up after this one. Question for three of you. So this is from Asian Events Trust. So our trust runs Chinese New Year celebrations in Wellington and asks to arrange events in the workplace during that time. How can we get companies to embrace diversity every day and not just acknowledge it on these special days? Troy, would you like to give any thoughts on that one?
I was thinking maybe Danny could have a go on this one first because she passed on the last one.
Yeah, clever, Troy. Very clever. Plus, you're being very inclusive. Thank you for that. I think as much as I like to say that that the responsibility rests with everybody, it starts at the top. So you, I really do believe that you've got to have an advocate for this at the top of the organization, and a deliberate message spread that it's important to the organization. So how to get to the top is a different story. I suppose, in my career, I've had access to those people, or I've been aware of what their points of view were, and I understood that it was important to them. I think that, you're right, it can't just be an event kind of conversation. I really do think that this is now part of the fabric of our culture, and that in most workplaces, this is a topic that is of interest. Maybe they don't know how to crack it open. It might still be considered a little uncomfortable, or because we don't know all the answers. The proverbial, we may not want to talk about it. But it's been shown through studies that if this isn't supported at the top of an organization, then chances are you'll flounder in gaining any real ground. So for us within Holmes, all that really happened were that a group of people who were, really interested in seeing this become a bit more formalized, knocked on the door of one of our CEOs, and we knew he was a champion for the topic, and we just, basically asked for a formal setting for the conversation, and it took off like a wildfire. I mean, this is the thing. I think people want to take some action, but listen, we're all busy, right, and distracted, and again, we don't have all the answers, so it can be kind of intimidating to make a start. So I would say make a lot of noise. Find the people who are interested, work your way up to get to some of those people toward the top, and if they're hearing that interest and passion for doing something, then chances are they'll grab hold of it. And if they don't, you might not be talking to the right company. You might not be with the right company. But I really believe that most organizations want to do the right thing in this space. And if they haven't started, it's just that they haven't had the fire lit under them. So go let a fire somewhere. But do get to the top, because once that message propagates and is shown to be important at a senior level, then people tend to really listen, and you have the support you need to make a difference. How was that, Troy?
Do you guys have any other thoughts on that question?
No, I think that's a great message from Danny. They say a fish rots from its head, so start at the top.
Yeah, I think
Awesome.
just adding on that, it is about those champions, isn't it, Danny? Like, if you don't have those champions inside your business, what some people may call leaders, some people call disruptors, but if you don't have those champions who are pushing ahead and doing these things, nothing really happens. So you do need to find out who those champions is and find a champion at every level and continue it to the top.
Yeah, that's right. And speaking of blind spots and unconscious bias, don't assume you know who they are. It might be the least likely of the people within the senior level of your organization. You just never know. So again, be open and consider that you might not know. You might have something in mind, a person in mind, but you might be wrong. And there might be somebody else even more passionate and an even better champion than you had considered. They're out there, though. They really are. We want to make change. I really believe that most people out there want to see change, want to do the right thing.
Sure. Cool. So I think we'll end it at that. If you guys do have any further questions, feel free to reach out to Rosalind, Troy, or Danny via LinkedIn. I'm sure they'll be happy to answer any questions that you do have. We'll finish it there. We do have a couple more events coming up for the young engineers. We've got the Young Engineers Christmas Party on the 8th of December and the Member Connect on the 9th. So keep an eye out for the newsletters coming from Engineering New Zealand for those events. And yeah, just want to say a big thank you to our presenters. I think it's been a really great discussion. And yeah, thanks everyone for joining. We'll see you next time.
Thanks everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Cheers.